For months, Leonard believed nothing could surprise him anymore. A successful businessman and widower for just over 2 years, he lived life on autopilot. Work had become his refuge, and his son, his only reason to keep going. So when he decided to hire a new nanny, he expected nothing more than someone responsible, punctual, and discreet. But what he found was something entirely different. From the very first day, there was something about that young woman, in the way she looked, the way she spoke to the child, the way she treated silence with respect. Leonard didn't know it yet, but he was about to discover that sometimes the greatest new beginnings arrive disguised as routine, and what this nanny would do in the months to come would change everything. The mansion stood atop a hill surrounded by vineyards and silence. It was imposing, modern, but also cold, as if time had stopped there since pain had taken up residence. After the premature death of his wife, Leonard Bennett buried himself in work, in numbers, in endless meetings that filled the voids but didn't heal them. His son, Thomas, only 4 years old, was a quiet boy, smart but withdrawn. Smiles had become rare since his mother's absence. Nannies came and went. None lasted more than a few weeks. None seemed to see beyond the basic duties. Until she arrived, Amelia came on a grey morning, carrying a simple folder, modest clothes, and a calm gaze. There was something steady, almost old-fashioned about her, as if she didn't belong to this time, but to another, when people still truly cared. "Good morning, Mr. Oliver," she said, greeted by the butler. Leonard watched her from the staircase, at a distance without introducing himself. He was used to testing people in silence. During the interview, she answered confidently, but without arrogance. She had experience with children, had studied abroad, and had recently moved to the city. When the butler asked if she was prepared to work with a grieving child and an absent father, she simply nodded. "I'm not here to replace anyone. I just want to help." She was hired that same afternoon. In the first days, there was barely any contact between Amelia and Leonard. He left early, returned late, and rarely came down for dinner, but little by little, subtle changes began to unfold. Thomas's laughter, once forgotten, echoed one late afternoon. The sound of books being read aloud filled the halls. A drawing, left on the living room floor, bore words written in different languages. But Leonard didn't know yet. He had no idea what, silently, was being built right there, under his own roof. Leonard was no longer the type to notice details, or at least he wasn't anymore. Once, he noticed everything: his wife's favorite books, the drawings Thomas made, even the flowers that wilted in the garden. But grief had stolen that sensitivity from him, leaving only what was essential for survival. That's why, when he noticed the glow of the magic lantern beneath Thomas's bedroom door on an ordinary Tuesday night, something inside him stirred: curiosity, or maybe the shock of hearing, for the first time in months, his son's voice telling a story, full of excitement. He leaned against the wall, listening. The story was about a knight and a dragon, with a plot that switched languages without warning. It began in Portuguese, then came a sentence in French, followed by another in Spanish. Like a game. Leonard frowned. Maybe a video, he thought, or a new toy. But it wasn't. The next morning, while walking past the house library, he paused when he heard a snippet of music coming from inside. It was an old French song, and the voice singing it was soft. It was Amelia's. She was sitting on the rug with Thomas beside her, both cutting out magazine pictures and gluing them onto colored paper. They laughed, spoke quietly, exchanged words in different languages. Everything seemed natural, almost intimate, as if it had always been that way. When Amelia noticed his presence, she simply smiled, without getting up. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett." Leonard, caught off guard, only nodded. He watched them for a few more seconds, then walked away in silence. It confused him. and at the same time reminded him of how the house used to feel before the silence. That night, while dining alone, he found a note on the table. Delicate handwriting, written by hand. Thomas had a good dinner. We played a little and he fell asleep peacefully. See you tomorrow. A. Simple. No embellishments. But there was care in it. Leonard stared at the note for a long time. Then, without really knowing why, he placed it in the drawer of the dining room table. He didn't understand it yet, but he was beginning to feel. Leonard Bennett's house had always functioned like clockwork, fixed schedules, hushed voices, restrained footsteps. Since the loss of his wife, the home had become a functional place, beautiful on the outside, sterile within. But ever since Amelia arrived, something subtle had started to change. It wasn't just Thomas who seemed different. It was the air, the scent of warm bread in the morning, the sound of soft children's songs, the muffled laughter drifting from the garden. Leonard said nothing, but he noticed. They were such delicate changes that, if he hadn't been paying attention, they might have gone unnoticed. One ordinary morning, while having coffee, he noticed that Thomas now always came down for breakfast already dressed and wearing the right shoes. Before, he would drag himself out sleepily, uninterested in everything. "Good morning, Daddy," the boy said that Tuesday, with a slight French accent. Then he laughed, seeing the surprise in his father's eyes. "Amelia taught me," Leonard replied with a simple "good morning," but the scene stayed with him the entire day. That same afternoon, returning early from a meeting, he passed by the hallway and heard Thomas telling a story out loud. A children's book, alone, with intonation, with rhythm, as if he were performing. Leonard paused and listened unnoticed. When he finally entered the room, Thomas stopped and looked at him proudly. "I'm rehearsing for Amelia's theater," he explained. "She puts on a show just for me, with voices, even with accents. Can I show you later?" Leonard didn't know what to say. He just nodded. Later that night, Amelia left another simple note beside his dinner plate. "Today, Thomas told me he wanted to make you smile. I thought you'd like to know." A. Leonard ran his fingers over the paper and for the first time in a long while, smiled without realizing it. He didn't ask how Amelia did it, but it was becoming clearer each day. This woman wasn't just a nanny. She was like a quiet spark, rekindling life where only ashes had remained. Leonard rarely arrived home before sunset. But that day, a cancelled appointment freed him earlier than usual. As he stepped inside, the sound of laughter coming from the garden made him pause. It wasn't just Thomas's voice. It was hers too. Silently, he crossed the house, opened the side door, and watched through the glass without being seen. Thomas was running across the lawn, wearing an improvised cape made from a blue sheet, shouting words in French. Amelia, sitting in the grass with a notebook in her lap, applauded and encouraged him, mixing French and Italian phrases with ease. The boy stopped, breathless, and pointed to the sky. "Papà, mira, quella nuvola sembra un drago." Leonard frowned. He had used 3 languages in a single sentence. Amelia laid down in the grass beside the boy and said something soft, something Leonard couldn't quite hear. But the effect was immediate. Thomas closed his eyes, serene, as if the world were exactly as it should be. Leonard leaned against the door. For the first time, not with tension or stiffness. He stayed there, still, just watching. And in that moment, between the setting sun and the silent harmony of a scene that didn't quite belong to him, he felt something strange, a twinge of longing for something he had never had, a home with lightness, a child laughing freely, a woman with a generous soul in that space. That night, as he sat down for dinner, he found the plate decorated with sprigs of rosemary and a hint of lemon zest. Nothing grand, but made with intention. The note, as always, was there. "Today, Thomas asked me if love can be taught. I said yes, with simple, genuine gestures. He then gave me a flower. It's in the vase in the kitchen. A. Leonard ran his fingers over the paper and after a long pause whispered quietly, "Thank you." He didn't even notice that in that moment he was smiling again, but unlike the smile before, this one had something more, surrender, even if he still denied it. The late afternoon fell over the estate like a golden veil. Thomas ran through the garden, hair tousled by the wind, laughing loudly while Amelia watched from a stone bench, her eyes full of tenderness. In the background, discreetly hidden between the veranda columns, Leonard observed. There were days when he made up excuses to work from home just to watch them together. But that afternoon, something felt different. Amelia was reading a story to Thomas, in French, with perfect intonation, and rehearsed pauses as if performing a play. The boy, attentive, followed every word. Though he couldn't yet read, he memorized phrases and linked words to images with astonishing ease. When the story ended, Thomas turned to the nanny, eyes shining. "Maintenant, en Italian?" Amelia laughed, pretending to be tired. "Only, if you promise we'll practice Spanish after." Leonard furrowed his brow, almost unable to believe what he had just heard. This was more than dedication, it was artistry. He knew Amelia was caring and gentle, but teaching his son to communicate. In 3 languages? Not even the most prestigious schools had managed such progress. That evening, he asked her to join him in the study. "Sit down, Amelia," he said in a neutral tone, trying to hide how impressed he truly was. She obeyed, slightly apprehensive. "Since when has Thomas been learning other languages with you?" Amelia hesitated, then answered honestly. "It started gradually, a song in French, a game in Spanish, a wordplay in Italian. He enjoyed it, so I kept going. I never pushed." Leonard remained silent for a few long seconds. Then he exhaled, softly, almost inaudibly. "I wasn't expecting this. I didn't even think he had that kind of capacity. But maybe the credit doesn't belong to him alone." Amelia kept her eyes on the floor, slightly unsettled. "It wasn't ambition, sir. I just wanted him to feel safe and confident." Leonard stood and walked to the window. The sky was dark, and the garden lights shimmered faintly in the distance. "My son went through a loss I don't even know how to heal," he said, his voice hoarse. "And yet, he laughs with you, he learns with you, he lives with you." The silence between them was broken only by his whisper. "Thank you." Amelia bit her lip, moved. She didn't answer with words, just a look that said everything. Winter announced itself with cold mornings and the scent of fresh bread coming from the kitchen. That week, Leonard seemed more present than ever. With each breakfast, each step through the house, he looked for more reasons to stay close. Not just for his son, but for her. Thomas, now 4.5, switched naturally between French, Spanish, and Italian, even though he couldn't yet read. He loved repeating sounds, singing songs, and creating little plays. Amelia had lit a spark in him that no one else had managed to ignite. One evening, Leonard appeared in the kitchen after putting his son to bed. Amelia was finishing the dishes, wearing a damp apron and a messy bun on top of her head. When she saw him, she offered a gentle smile. "Anything else, sir?" He shook his head, then stepped closer, hesitant. "Actually, yes, I've been thinking about you." Amelia looked away, surprised. He continued, "I've been wondering how someone like you, so young, so discreet, speaks 3 languages, knows Italian authors, Spanish legends, and French lullabies. Who are you, Amelia?" She sighed. She knew this moment would come sooner or later. "I grew up traveling, Mr. Bennett. My father was a diplomat. I lived in Geneva, Madrid, Florence, but everything fell apart when he died. My mother took me back to Brazil. We sold everything, and I had to start over, alone." A long silence followed. Then she added, "I chose to care for children because I thought it would be easier than dealing with adults, and deep down, maybe it was my way of caring for the child I stopped being." Leonard didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at her, as if seeing her fully for the first time. "You're not an ordinary nanny, Amelia. And I don't say that because of the languages." She gave a shy smile. "I only wanted to give Thomas back what the world had taken from me. The feeling of being safe." He stepped closer and then again, until their hands met without warning. "You gave him more than safety. You brought him joy. And to me, you brought back hope." The words lingered in the air, suspended. And there, in the middle of the kitchen, without ceremony, Leonard kissed her, with the intensity of someone who had waited too long to let himself feel. Months later, Amelia was no longer just the nanny. She was a constant presence at dinners, on Sunday mornings, and in the hugs of Thomas, who now called her my best friend in the world. And on an ordinary afternoon in the garden where it all began, Thomas ran up to her with a book in his hands and shouted, mixing languages, "Mama, look!" She froze. So did Leonard, but neither of them corrected the word, because in that moment what he said was exactly what he felt. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe for more emotional tales like this one. Share it with someone who believes that true new beginnings can come from the most unexpected places. And if you'd love to see how this story continues, let us know in the comments.